Hey everybody, today I'm going to show you how to take a small field study, a painting I did on location, into the studio to make a larger piece of artwork. My small painting was 12 inches by 12 inches and the larger work was 36 by 36 inches. I think it's really great to know about this process because there's times when a large painting just can't be created on location. The light is moving too quickly, maybe there's details to capture, or there's logistics such as too much traffic or too much distraction. In the case of this painting, I was actually working in a parking lot and the shop got pretty busy, so I had to vacate. Plus the light was moving really quickly. Let's take a look at some of the equipment I would use in the field and then in the studio. Thanks for being here. Do like and share. It helps my channel to grow. Here's an example of my typical paints I use when I'm on location with my portable oil paint box. And then for studio equipment, I usually expand my palette slightly. You can see some neutrals over on the far left in a tube and then put out on the palette on the right. So this yellow, red, and blue grouping does the majority of my mixes for any painting. I might choose to use that gray if I have just a really large amount of paint to mix as a starting point. It can save some time. And I have these big piles of color to make sure when I'm working on large passages that I don't run out and have to spend time recreating a puddle of color. It's really cool to see it in time-lapse form. This represents about, I would say, a week of working on the painting on and off. In the video, you might see a little bit of black fur. It looks like I'm wearing a scarf, but that's my cat. He likes to be on my shoulder sometimes when I paint. Now we're ready to see how the painting comes together. I'm working with the sky, pre-mixed my colors, and I just kind of slab that on with a knife. Next, I block in the tree. The tree and the landmass is important to have all of this be darker than the sky. So let's focus again on that tree because I found this was kind of a really good key point of the upright form of the tree is darker, and then I wanted to have also the grass be darker. So I worked a lot on this tree, and then you'll see in the future I leave this alone, block in the rest of it. I wanted to chunk in some of the sky. My next task was to really work and rework the sky. This was all done wet and wet. I like to work in one sitting, maybe two, and there you can see Cassie on my shoulder. So I like to manipulate the wet paint so that it's movable with the knife, movable with the brush. I can infuse color, I can sculpt it around, I can scrape it off, and I'll do this kind of push-pull motion. In reviewing the video, I'm kind of like, wow, I went over this, I put in color, I changed the shapes. But yeah, that's part of the process, and the painting needed to develop in this way. It keeps it really fresh. So it's a mix of really tight kind of drawing and doing good shapes, and then blasting in color and getting kind of an energy going, using my whole arm, not just the brush. Mostly I'm using between a number 4 and a number 12 brush. And I do want to bring that down into the water. Notice that the water body is now the same color mostly as the sky. I used the same sky color, but shifted everything a little bit darker, and I don't have as much variety in the water. That helps it sit in place and not compete with the sky. Things are going along great, and I feel like the painting's coming together quickly, but then I go through a period of paint and restate, and we'll see that next. I come to this point where there's just a problem in the painting. So the beginning went well, middle part, I had some work to do. So here I get busy with working on the background. I'm using my darkest dark here in the base of the tree. This warm chocolate brown is really important to have the rest of the painting sit in position. Nothing else is going to be as dark as the base of the tree and the shoreline in the front area of the painting. This helps the background. but there's more to do. Background, or that far distant plane, is sometimes a kind of hiccup point in a painting. That is not necessarily typical of everybody's situation, but I've found over time, and I describe it as the walking plane, or what you could walk on, versus the upright plane where something is going vertically. Like that kind of knitting together just needs a bit of work. I make this lighter, I subdue the shapes, I re-script the sky to top of tree juncture. I try different types of things like wiping out. I'm trying not to get bummed out. I'm pushing forward with my painting. So these steps can really help to just keep working at that. I tried a lot of moves on the background, and I tried some highlights, and push-pull is the way to go. I'm glad I worked through that time with the painting, and up next is pulling everything together. So I'm going to refocus and actually recalibrate my lights. You can see here it's super speed, working on the details. I had to step back often to make sure that the details were not going to kind of take over the painting. I redid those trees a number of times. Just when I thought it was finished with that background plane, I've had to regroup and redo that several times. The tree shape was super important. You can see the final painting to the left to see, as I work towards the finish, what my main moves were. It's interesting to see the video versus the photo of the final painting. Somewhere in between is the accurate middle. I saved that left tree until pretty much the last minute. And upcoming, you'll see me adding some detail of grasses, but I have to put everything in place to make sure that the final details, those last little lines, are just as I want them. If I put them in too soon, it's not going to serve the best interest of the painting. And therefore, working on the main masses, restating the sky, working on the painting is really the best way to go. And here I'm working on the final details, double checking everything to make sure it's in place, and finally working on that tree to my satisfaction. It's very interesting to see all of this process in hindsight. I'm not mentally thinking of every move as I go through it. Mostly I'm tapping into the feeling of being on location, and I'm hoping that the photos trigger that response. Okay, we're nearing the finish line. Yay. Loving working on this big tree, thinking about warm and cool, keeping the whole thing to be darker. It's really important to have this be a dark mass. It's such an important, key cornerstone of the painting. I wanted to get good sky hole shapes, but also parts of the tree that were caught in light and parts of the tree that were caught in shadow. Sometimes working on the tree means working on other parts of the painting. I realized I needed to have a cohesive look to the rest of it. So now that I had changed the background so many times, I really wanted to redo the water to make sure that was reading accurately, and put in some of these marsh grasses in preparation for doing the fine details, which would be kind of the top notes of the grasses with that ambient light. I was proud of myself for not adding too many details. Okay, now things are starting to come together. I'm working on the passage of the marsh waterway, and I'm trying to maintain in this lower part of the painting all of the texture that will go into describing the foliage. I want the trees overall to have a look of a darker and more crispy look than the marsh grasses. And even though I'm adding details such as branches and leaves, I have to kind of move forward balancing the painting. I do feel that after working for so long on the background, I kind of hit my stride with working on the sky holes of the tree, that kind of in between area where the sky peeks through. Don't want that to be too dominant. I really liked the lush and full look of the trees, so I didn't want to chip into that shape too much. And I really liked that first kiss of light where I had a kind of golden glow on the top, and then the light wasn't reaching the lower part of the tree, so I liked having that in shadow. It looks like I'm working with a smaller brush here, but sometimes I use a number 4 flat or even a number 2 round for this. And as the painting is coming together, it was important to kind of put away some of the reference and be thinking about the integrity of the painting as it was coming to be, tapping back into that experience of being on location. Notice I've also diminished some of that really strong dark that was during that mid process. That would be normal, where that dark can kind of dry and then I can go over that. So now I'm ready to come in with either a sable round or a rigger brush and work on some of those fine details of the marsh grasses. The whips, as they kind of flop over, catch the highlight of the sky in this twilight atmosphere, and that became an important part of the painting. Plus I added a few flowers and marsh grasses that were blooming. This color for the grass is very similar to the water color and also the top area of the sky, but it's different in that it has a component of green to it. It also has to still be a little darker because these grasses are part of the mass shape that represents this bank of grass, and it can't break that picture plane. I had a lot of fun working on this painting, and I hope you enjoy it. Well, that wraps it up for today's painting session. Thanks for hanging out and watching as I created this artwork.